and just in general, how this story of the Garden of Eden, how much it has fueled the imagination in the Western, especially Jewish and Christian traditions of the really the uh, endless possibilities of interpreting the story. And this is a great use of the idea of tree of knowledge. And many people think of knowledge as reason. In fact, I want to share with you that I am officially the scholar in residence of Israel Food Rescue this Shabbat. A group of people who have been volunteering here, and they're finishing up in Yerushalayim. So Rob and I were there last night, came back here to do the broadcast. I'll go back tomorrow. And so one of the people in the room, as I was teaching about Ner Adonai Nishmat Adam, the light of God is the human soul, and I talked about the infusion of spirituality and the breath and light of God, a person said to me, well, what if you're an atheist? And I talked about that, and the person said, can you uh, suggest a good book that I could give to an atheist? And I was stumped. I thought, wow, one book that I think would help, you know, an atheist, and forget about God, forget about theology, just the deep experience of the soul. And I'm sad to say nothing came to mind, and I should have said, go to Intrinsic Heart webpage, where Shanti's poems are listed, and just start reading poetry to see what happens to your soul. So when I go back today, that's exactly what that is your website, right? That's your website, Intrinsic Heart. Yeah, because when I go back this morning to the group, I'm going to make that recommendation, and I'm going to actually read this poem. So thank you. That's a wonderful way to open up the heart, and it shows people that the Bible is a source for endless interpretation and experience. This is another great example of that. So thank you so much for that poem. Um, and I would agree with you that there's a certain kind of reasoning that locks us in the boxes of our of our mentality, and doesn't make room for imagination and trying on different kinds of thinking. And as I'm thinking about going back today and teaching a little bit about uh, what atheism actually means, what I've discovered in my life is there are many kinds of atheists. There's a person who has a problem of theodicy. How could there be evil if there is a God? People are entirely committed to a purely materialistic, empirical understanding of human life. If it's not proven in science, mathematics, natural science, and so forth, then it can't exist. Like a limited understanding of reality. Reality is only that which is in the purview of a rather strict understanding of science. It's called actually scientism, not science as discovery, but science as an ideology. There's also people who are entirely cynical in this, one version of postmodernism is, since there are so many opinions about what love, justice, truth, and beauty is, there can be no metaphysical source of an answer. There is no answer. And of course, my response is the fact that people disagree about a metaphysical principle does not mean the metaphysical principle does not exist. So there are many reasons people deny metaphysical reality, meaning the metaphysical truth of, for example, love, justice, truth, and beauty, and the good, the holy, etc. Again, I think one of the ways through is a carefully chosen poem. All right, so I'm going to go on with my teaching. Did I do everything I'm supposed to do? Is that are we caught up? Huh? Okay, all right. So I'll go on with my teaching. I wanted to share a few thoughts about my teaching on Genesis, and this is a kind of a startling thought. Because the Genesis story is in the Bible, we assume that it was born to be in the Bible, as if there was a contest in ancient Judea on who can write a story about origins that we're going to put in the Bible. So people sat down and wrote Bible stories, and they sifted through them and said, okay, we're going to put this one in. What if the author, in my mind, it's obvious, had no concept of Bible? The whole idea of a Bible did not exist. Apparently, something called Torah Moshe, the teaching of Moses, would probably had to do with the ritual and moral laws that we find in Torah. But that was the teaching, the paideia, as it were, that held the people together. Uh, but we have no idea what else they considered sacred. They certainly had stories. For example, Isaiah refers to Sodom and Gomorrah, etc. But try to imagine, and the more I think about it, the more I'm convinced that we have an author here who simply wrote their own story. Clearly, I think this story came into being once there was writing, there was some degree of literacy. There was certainly copying. There were schools of prophecy. And just like the book of Job is clearly literature, the book of Ruth is a novella, the book of Esther. So there were novellas being written, the Song of Songs, the entire book of Songs. And someone said, I'm going to take a stab at something that you guys really might not like. Perhaps the cousin of the person who wrote the book of Job, and said, I got to take on God you guys aren't going to like, but I just got to get it out. There's something about human existence. There's something about we all feel trapped in a game that we don't understand. I want to write this out. And it became a huge hit in ancient Judea. It got to whoever edited the Bible and said, I think I'm going to put this in. And this is just exquisite. And we'll see. I mean, if people don't like it, they'll stop reading it. And so here we are in 2024, reading this very, very strange inclusion in the Bible. Now, here's the problem, as I've been saying. Once it gets in the Bible, well, things has to be, oh, it has to be Bible-ish. So it has to accord with Aristotelian theology and all these other uh, 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 trying to move back into English because I'm doing this in Hebrew lately, preconceptions of about God, about the Bible, and so forth. And so it's, as it were, the Bible has been squeezed into something that is theologically correct, a kind of political correctness. And therefore, it's taught as a theologically correct text. And I think it stops us from actually reading what the text says. So that's been my theme lately, is let's read what the text says and then ask us what does that say about what I think is the true core concern of these stories, which is philosophic anthropology. What does it feel like to be a human being? In my mind, these texts were not written as theology, but rather philosophic anthropology. What does it feel like to be a human being? And as I've been ruminating on this, I'm thinking of one line from Leonard Cohen's song, You Want It Darker, which I think is a truly exquisite encapsulation of the Gnostic tradition in Western religion. I strongly suggest you pull it out again and listen to it carefully. And there's a line where he says, if you are the dealer, I'm out of the game. If you're the dealer, I'm out of the game. So the sense that we're in this game, and we realize the dealer is double dealing. The dealer has stacked the deck. The dealer is dealing in such a way, no matter how hard we try, we're going to lose. And the author of the poem is looking at the divine and saying something like, I'm on to you. I get what you're doing, and I'm going to come after you. So for me, that is, by the way, that is a religious sensibility. It's a religious sensibility of both Gnosticism, the idea that we are trapped in a world of a demiurge, as it were, lower God, who resents us, who is out to hurt us and destroy us, and is hiding the reality of the true or upper God. So we live in this Gnostic reality. I think I know Leonard was on the Kabbalistic spectrum of Neoplatonism on one side, divine is layered into reality, versus the Gnostic one, which is the true divine is blocked off from reality, and we live in a Gnostic reality. And in our relationship, I was more on the Neoplatonic side, and he was more on the Gnostic side. They're both Kabbalah. Leonard Gershon Scholem wrote, Kabbalah is uh, the Jewish expression of the mix of Neoplatonism and Gnosticism. That's how Gershon Scholem defines Kabbalah. And as he and I got to know each other a little bit, I stood for the Neoplatonic side of the spectrum. He stood for the Gnostic side. And one thing that we both enjoyed was, we saw the world through these two very different lenses. And, as is true in the Jewish tradition, so we had to talk. He made the Gnostic case, I made the Neoplatonic case, and we never got tired of that beautiful mystical play between these two understandings of reality. So to sum this up, in some ways, the text that we are studying has a Gnostic feel, that there's something untoward going in in the world, in our lives. And if we expect things to be fair, if we expect things to proceed along a certain expected desired course, I think this text tells us there's a whole other way to think about what it means to be a human being. All right, that's my big windup for today. So we ended last time at the end of chapter 3. Now you will remember that according to my interpretation, um, the Nachash, the serpent, the word Nachash also has to do with sorcery and divination and all kinds of things that are prescribed later on in our tradition. And again, whoever wrote this knew that the word Nachash is freighted with many more meanings than just the serpent. It was a value-laden term, entirely of negative values. However, the ancient mythological tradition also freighted it with the sense of eternal life, because the snake could also regenerate and have new skin. Uh, so the conversation with the snake and the Ha'isha and the woman, I think that the contemporaneous listener then and of the author had this fully ambivalent understanding of what the term Nachash actually meant. So in the story, of course, the Nachash tempts the woman. Um, I believe it was Rabbi Manning last time who pointed out, well, had the Nachash eaten from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Well, that's a great point. Of course, if the Nachash heard the divine say to the Adam, the earthman, the day you eat of it, you will die, the Nachash knew that would not happen. How would the Nachash know that if the woman or the man ate from the tree, they wouldn't die? Well, the Nachash must have already eaten from it. So the Nachash knew. The Nachash knew that God was prevaricating there a little bit, and that wouldn't happen. And the Nachash knew what actually does happen when you eat from the tree, which is you are suddenly aware that you're naked. And okay, I had a very playful thought. The Nachash eats from the fruit and says, "Oh no, I'm a phallic symbol," right? And then many things come from that. All right. So of course the Ha'isha, the name Eve isn't given until the end of the chapter, eats. Adam eats. They become aware that they are naked, arum, which sounds just like the Hebrew word arum, which means clever or plotting or scheming. Same word. The snake is arum, meaning scheming, plotting, manipulative, and they are arum, meaning naked. They're absolute homonyms in Hebrew. Um, the divine castigates them for not obeying, and then toward the end of chapter 3. Um, in verse 20, the woman's name is finally Eve, Chava, in chapter 3, verse 20. Then the divine makes Adam and Chava garments of skin, and he clothed them. The Midrashic tradition says it was snake skin loincloths. So we know what happened to the snake, I think, if that tradition is true. Um, and then in verse 22, I think we have this divine counsel that I spoke about, where it says, "Let us make the human being in our image." Well, who's the "let us"? That's not the royal we or the rural we. That is actually the divine counsel that we see evidence of, for example, in the first 2 chapters of Job. They now reflect and say, if this being eats from the tree of life, he'll live forever and become like one of us. So we see the divine council is very jealous of their prerogatives, and they decide to banish the human being from Gan Eden. And they put at the entrance to Eden the Kruvim, the cherubs. Um, ever since the Renaissance, I think we see cherubs as corpulent little babies. But of course, the word kruv in the Bible is a fierce kind of a griffin, a lion-looking kind of being with a fiery sword. So they're fearsome in the Bible, not cute little toddlers, circling around in heaven. And of course, the later tradition uses the idea of the kruvim, I don't like to say cherub because it's association. I'll call it kruvim. The griffins with fiery swords, they are then part of the decoration of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle, which holds the Holy Ark. And of course, on top of the Holy Ark are the Kruvim, which tells us if you want to go back to the Eden before the fall, meaning when the human beings lived in complete harmony with the divine, with the lamb, with the animals and so forth, this is the path there. So this is the path to the, as it were, laws of life that restore us to our Edenic authentic selves, which is also an incredible idea that even though we've never lived in Eden, the place of perfect harmony, we all know what it's like. We have an inborn knowledge of what life should be like. And when life is not that way, we say, life ought not be this way. How do we know that? Because we, I think, have some kind of deep imprint of love, justice, truth, beauty, the good and the holy. And we assess the world by this imprinted metaphysical knowledge. All right, so they are cast out from the garden at the end of chapter 3, verse 24, and having driven out the earthman, God stationed at the east of Eden, and some people still did not know that's where the name of the book, East of Eden, comes from, is when you're banished from Eden. And the Kruvim and the flame of the ever-turning sword to guard the way to the tree of life. Wow, great. Now we come into the follow-up story. Here they are, east of Eden, and what happens? Chapter 4, verse 1. Adam yada et Chava ishto. The earthman had sexual intercourse with his wife Chava. Now here the word yada is being used right after the knowledge of the tree of Eitz Da'at Tov V'Ra, the knowledge. And so here we understand immediately that the word yada is not only intellectual knowledge, not only spiritual knowledge, as our all being Yodei Adonai, the knowers of God. In the Bible, it also has a sexual connotation. And I think from the biblical perspective, the idea in the heterosexual imaging that the human beings overcome their separation. And I think if we put a biological sexuality out of it, the sense that we all are yearning to overcome our loneliness as human beings, as we saw in Genesis chapter 2. First of all, by entwining our lives with other people, and we, as it were, share a soul experience. This is imaged with sexuality, but I think goes far beyond sexuality. So here it's basically sexual knowledge. Adam, he knew his wife Eve, Vatahar, and she became pregnant, Vateled, and she bore it Cain. Okay, Cain. And now the Bible gives us the etymology of the term, and it says, Vatomer, thus saying, Kaniti ish et Adonai. Kaniti ish et Adonai. What does that mean? Well, the word kana is two different words that are homonyms. Kana means to acquire, which is oddly how it is usually used here. But the other word kana means create. For example, God is called Koneh Shamayim Ba'aretz, the creator of heaven and earth. Now, some people actually still translate, what does it mean that God is Koneh Shamayim Ba'aretz? They say God acquired the heavens and the earth, which is actually preposterous because it's clear it's a homonym. So when she says, Kaniti ish et Adonai, here the word et means with. The word et usually introduces a direct object, but there are many places where the word et is used as with. It says, I created a person with God. Straight up, what it means if you get rid of any preconceptions about Chava. So it says, Kaniti ish et Adonai, I created a man with God. Now, I think this takes us to the mystery of regeneration, the mystery of pregnancy. On one hand, the woman knows that she was impregnated. On the other hand, the mystery that she actually bears another human being inside of her. And from a mystical sense, biologically, the man impregnated me. But the mystery of a human being being born within me, this is God and I. This is something that is so profoundly mystical that another human being is being produced within me. So she has this sense of, Adam is somehow, or the Adam, we have to remember to say the Adam, the earth man, he's peripheral here. She has a sense of the Chava, the mother of all life. So the name that she's given back in chapter 3, verse 20, where Adam says, Vaikra Adam et Shem Ishto Chava, and the earth man called his woman Chava, ki hi haita em kol chai, the mother of all life. So from one perspective, you might say that Genesis 3:20 was here to introduce chapter 4, verse 1. She is the mother of all life with God. She didn't see herself as a goddess, although she could have. And there are many goddesses that were imaged, pregnant figurines of the woman God, the pregnant woman God. She said, "No, I'm not a goddess. I'm not God, but definitely God and I did this together." So this is, as it were, when you see the word Cain or Cain, think of created by God and woman. From the word kana, create. She says, Kaniti ish et Adonai, I made a man with God. So when you think Cain and Abel, don't think of the murderer. Think of a God man. I really don't have a good translation yet. Maybe one will come to me. But you might say, I don't know, a sub-god, like one of the children of Zeus, a demigod, as it were. Probably demigod is the best translation. So the demigod called Cain is born. And then look at verse 2. It says, Vatosef laledet. Now, lohosif means to add on to something. Like there's something essential and you add on to it. So, but Tosef laledet, she added on, which is the sense that Hevel does not have his own separate identity. He's an addition. He's like the topping, as it were, to Cain. He says, Vatosef laledet et achiv et Hevel. Now, what does Hevel mean? The author could not have been more clear to us. Hevel means emptiness. Hevel means something ephemeral. In fact, if you go to Ecclesiastes, where he says, Hevel, Hevel, Hakol Hevelim. Emptiness, emptiness, everything is empty. Or vanity, vanity, everything is vanity. Look in your Bible. Look how the book of Ecclesiastes opens up. That is Hevel's name. So again, what are the names? Demigod and emptiness. Demigod and ephemerality. That's the names of the two sons. So now we already have a sense of the kind of the moral standoff between the demigod, the man created of woman and God, and the add-on Hevel, which is insubstantiality, probably is the best translation. And then it says, Vayhi Hevel ro'etzom, and Hevel was a shepherd. V'Cain haya oved adama, and Cain, the demigod, was a worker of the land, which is exactly what Adam, the earth man's work was to be. So the divine said, you're going to work the land. You'll be a tiller of soil. So remember, Adam is from the word Adama. So you might say Cain inherits the role of the human being from Eden, which is to work the ground, Adam, Adama. And Cain, the demigod, as it were, is going to continue working the land. And again, you see what the shepherd does is lives right above the land. Like the animals are grazing on the desha, on the pasture, but it is the earthman who actually goes into the land and brings out crops and plants trees and so forth. And if you look at the Gan Eden story and the aftermath, the worker of the soil clearly is privileged over the ro'etzom. The work of the soil is privileged over the shepherd, almost ontologically from the story. What happens then? Vayhi miketz hayamim, after some time. The word ketz means end. Ketz hayamim means after some time. But ketz has a few different meanings. On one hand, kayetz means summer, which means the somehow the cycling as the end of the year before the fall. But ketz also means end. Sometimes the ketz means the apocalypse. So ketz hayamim, um, at the end. Now, when you know the rest of the story, it was kind of a ketz. There was some kind of like annihilation getting ready to happen. So it's a completely it's a word that has a semantic stretch to it. It can either be after some time or at the end of days. Yeah, Vayave Cain mipri Adama, and Cain brings from the fruit of the Adama minchal Adonai, a gift to Adonai, a gift to God. Right? We say, wow, that's kind of religious sensibility. I'm the worker of the soil. I've produced the fruit of the land, and we don't know exactly what that meant to bring it. There's probably some kind of ancient altar or something. Then he brings it to the divine as a way of gratitude for creating this incredibly fruitful earth. And then it says, um, um, "Vehevel hevi gamhu mi bechorot sono," and Hevel brought from the firstborn of his from his herd, umi chelvehem, and from the fats. And this implies, when we look at the sacrificial, that you burn the fats on the altar. Vayisha Adonai el Hevel ve'el minchato. Vayisha means turn toward in favor, and God favored Hevel's mincha, Hevel's gift. Now, this is the reader is astonished. There's Cain has not been attributed any moral or spiritual imperfections. He's doing exactly what the human being is ontologically instructed to do. And from the reader's perspective, we're stunned with for no reason, as it were. The divine looks with favor upon Hevel's offering. Um, um, Now let's try to imagine. Again, now we're reading the story magically. How Cain feels. He's the firstborn of the earth man and the mother of life. He's doing exactly what the human being is programmed to do. He brings an offering. He assumes to be praised, and then he looks at the shepherd, who brings his offering, and in a shocking way, the divine says, "I actually prefer his offering, not yours." So when you try to think of the idea of shame, now remember, that's one of my interpretations. What happened in Gan Eden is because it is introduced with lo hitboshashu, they did not experience shame. They eat from the tree and they are suddenly realize that they are naked. Their erva, their genitalia is showing. So they experience shame. Now, with the experience of shame as it were being planted into the human condition, what happens when you think you're doing exactly what you're supposed to do and you expect the approval not just of your parents, but of the divine? Somebody else brings something and the divine says, "I like his, not yours." Um, by the way, from my knowledge of shame and child development and adult development, the idea of shame is of being insufficient, not measuring up. Somebody is better than you, especially when you're so invested in accepting divine approval. I just imagine this being devastating to Cain, and I think the author went on to the experience of shame. So we have the shame experience revealed yet again in Gan Eden, and now with the first generation out of Eden, meaning Cain. And from the extended discussion I gave on shame a few times ago, the experience of shame is probably the most debilitating experience a human being can have. There's something insufficient about me. There's something wrong with me. I don't measure up. I'm not normal. I'm not like others. That goes very deep into us. And then many people spend the rest of their lives compensating for that. How do I do things that make me measure up? And I think there's two ways to go. One is you build a persona, you build a front, so that other people will attribute to you worthiness. And we do, many of us do very worthy things to overcome the stain, the experience of shame. Other people say, "I'm not even going to try," and they go down a road of self-destruction. And then there's the preferred path, which is at a certain point, a person, again, this is a very big part of spiritual psychology from my perspective, is the deep experience of shame, that you're able to go in and do one of the most difficult things in the world is experience your shame wound. Now, most of us live our lives completely defended from experiencing our shame wound because it is so debilitating. So I think I mentioned a couple of times ago, a person on a spiritual path who really wants to arrive somewhere, you don't avoid the shame wound. You learn how to go deeply into the shame wound. You experience it. You don't run away from it. And I think when consciousness is brought into the shame wound, it brings up the healing of the soul and we can work it through. You're not done once, but it opens up, I think, the full healing of the wound of the human condition. And again, the best book to read is Gershon Kaufman's book, Shame, the Power of Care. I'm sorry because he has two different titles for the book. Gershon Kaufman, two books on shame, one written in the 80s, then rewritten, I think, in the early 2000s. I mean, if you're interested in the inner depths of the human experience, it is a life-changing book. When I read the book, I'd never read anything before, since. The way that it just goes so deeply into the human condition. All right, so this is my interpretation of Cain. Cain experiences the depth of the shame wound. It shocks him, it surprises him. He's destabilized from it. Now, then the divine does something that I think is just cruel. This is a cruel, as we're grinding in on the shame wound. The divine says, it says, not surprisingly, Vayichar leKayin me'od, vayiplu panav. And Yichar has a sense of the nostrils flaring, and Cain was very angry, and his face fell. Okay, now this idea of face, having face, shaving face, and his face fell. You know, the idea of face is a very common term. We want to save face. And when the face falls, means you can't save face. It's obvious that you are devastated. There's no save face here. And then the divine asks, a completely insincere why question. Remember when I do my spiritual psychology, the complaining through why says, why are you standing there? Question or complaint. Why did you get the oil changed? Question or complaint. Why didn't you check out the garbage? Question or complaint. It's not a question, it's a complaint hidden as a why question. So here we have the archetypal why question. What does the divine say? Vayomer Adonai El Cain, and God says to the demigod, Lama haralacha, velama naflu panecha. Why are you upset? And why did you lose face? And Cain, I think, wants to say, you're asking me why you did it to me. How could you do this to me? I chose the work you gave to my father. I did my very best. I offered it to you. And you look at me and say, nah, I'm going to go with him. So I just imagine Cain being outraged. You know, the shame, again, this is my interpretation, turns to rage. What do you mean why? You know why you did it. Okay. So I just imagine this unconscious thought of Cain as Cain compares the preposterous why question that God presents. And now God then rubs it even more and say, like, tis, 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 it's your fault. And God says, Halo im tetiv set. Im tetiv, if you do well, set, you will endure, you will bear, you will rise. Laset means to bear things. Im tetiv set, if you do well, set. I think Cain feels, well, what did I do wrong? What do you mean, if I do well, I will be raised? I didn't do anything wrong. Why do you, again, rhetorically, why did you do this to me? And then comes a phrase that I think has been mistranslated forever. Okay. I run this by a couple of Bible scholars and they say, wow, Finley, you might be onto something. I've never read it that way. Here's what it says. Halo im tetiv said, if you do well, you will be brought up, you'll endure. Vim lo tetiv, and if you don't do well, it says, la petach chatat rovet. This is almost always translated as, at the opening, sin will, as it were, lie down in wait. Let's see what my translation says. But if you do not improve yourself, sin rests at the door. Okay, so rovetz is what a snake does. It's coiled. Sometimes a mirbat is like a lair. where an animal is hiding like a nest, a hidden place. It can be used with a predatory animal, but the idea is lying in wait in its lair. Now, here's the problem. It says lapetach chatat rovetz. The word chatat is a feminine word in Hebrew grammar. Rovetz is masculine. So if you're going to say lapetach chatat rovetz, it has to be lapetach chatat rovetzet, the feminine subject. If chatat is feminine, the verb has to be feminine. In fact, a little bit later, it says lapetach chatat rovetz, sin awaits or is in the lair. Ve'elecha teshukato, and its teshuka, its desire is toward you. Well, again, it says teshukato, masculine, but chatat is feminine. Now, I'm not saying my research is complete, but I've looked in every Bible dictionary I can find. It always says chatat is feminine. Chatat is feminine, but teshukato refers to a masculine. So I've asked a few people, and they've said, I've never noticed it. A few people got upset with me and said I'm not a sophisticated reader of the Bible, which I think is the resort of scoundrels, which means we're going to ignore the grammar. We're just going to say you don't know how to read the Bible, which is quite possible. It could be wrong in all this. But then there's an easy other interpretation. Rovetz is a masculine, and chatat rovetz can also mean the sin of the rovetz, or the sin of the being lying in wait. The sin of the being lying in wait. The sin of the rovetz, the sin of the animal in the lair. Well, the word rovetz is used with snakes. The snake is coiled, getting ready to strike. It says, if you don't, the chatat, right, the sin, the word chet has also idea of being somehow spiritually impaired. So the chatat of the rovetz, as it were, the sin of the snake is waiting for you. Now we see Cain is by God said, you are in the position of your mother. Okay, chatat rovetz, the animal of the rovetz, the animal lying in wait, will lead you to sin. So it's not the sin, the sin is waiting, but the sin of the wait, the one waiting, the one getting ready to strike out to you. So that's my interpretation here. So it says, again, I'm just reading the grammar. I mean, why did I miss this? Because the word chatat is feminine, therefore it have to be either chatat rovetzet, the sin is in its lair, or the sin of the one in the lair. It says so I will say at the entrance, the sin of the animal in the lair, the animal in I'll say, go ahead and name it. The snake in the lair is at the entrance. Ve'lecha teshukato, and it desires you. V'ata timsholbo, but you can rule over it. Now this idea that the rovetz, the snake, has teshukah, has desire. That takes us back to the snake in Eden. Now we understand the con. The snake in the, guarding the trees of knowledge of good and evil had a teshukah, as it were, to metaphorically bite them and put his venom into the human being, the sin of the venom of what? Of chatat, the ability to sin, the ability to transgress, the ability to stray. That's the bite. That's the bite of the snake. And from this perspective, what does the snake want to do? It wants to bite. It wants to put his venom into you. So now I think we're brought into the consciousness of some animals. Some animals are predators. That's what they do. When they see the prey, they have a teshukah, a deep desire to the prey. Now, here's a pretty dark thought that I oftentimes offer to people. People say to me, why would this person do this to me? Why would my husband, wife, child, parent say such horribly mean things to me? And if I know the person well enough and we've done a lot of spiritual work, I'll say, I'm going to share something that may upset you, but I think it's true. Some of us are genetically descended from predators. Okay. We have, we have the teeth of animals that chew meat. Our eyes aren't here like an antelope. Our eyes are here like a predator. There's a predatory nature in human beings. And for some people, when they get really angry, the other person turns into prey. Okay? They lock in, and their intention is to hurt. So when people say horrible things to each other, they're not trying to give information when people insult. It's not like they gave it some rumination and say, I have a few words that accurately describe you. What they actually want to do is attack and destroy a person's sense of self. Now, that's oftentimes, and again, we have a sophisticated author here, our experience of shame is introduced in us when other people, sometimes parents, children on the playground, we turn into prey, and they destroy us with their words. So I think the shame wound is oftentimes inflicted when we become the prey of a person who's moved into a predatory state of consciousness. Now, some people would never do this, no matter how upset they get. They won't throw a litany of vicious insults at somebody. In fact, when I meet people who have gone into a litany of vicious insults, and I meet them when they become sane again, they oftentimes say, I don't remember saying that, right? And thing is, sometimes it's actually recorded, or they write it in text. And they say, oh, I don't think I said that. The person says, look at the text. And you see a litany of the most horrible, horrible insults, vicious language. They look at it and say, I can't believe I wrote that. I can't believe I wrote that. I indeed wrote it. I can't believe I wrote it. And then that person says to me, Rabbi Finley, what happened to me? I say, well, we get really angry. A predatory consciousness rises from within us, takes over our consciousness, and we become pure predators set on destroying another human being. We actually go insane. We go out of our minds. In fact, sometimes when email first came and people would write these dense single-spaced, 2-page emails, just vicious, uh, I call it texting psychosis. Because as you look at it, you say, oh, yeah, I believe that. Let me add on. I believe, let me add. And they would just go on, and they'd hit the send button. The other person would get it and say, oh my God, I can't believe this hurts so much. And, I remember when I would get those now and then, I would say, well, this person's having a psychotic break. They are out of their minds. They've gone insane. And you bring it up and they say, well, I was just trying to say, I said what you're trying to say. I believe you, but this is what you said. And they say, well, we had a misunderstanding. I said, this is pretty clear. It's not a misunderstanding. They say, I said, I'll tell you what, I'll give you a rewind. If you would like to erase this email from our relationship and just say, I rewind it, you can rewind that moment, just don't ever do it again. Now, why don't some people take the rewind? Why don't some people say, it's a horrible thing I did. I retract it. I love us to reset. I'll never do that again. So I've offered people retraction. Just take it back. You had a bad moment. We all have bits of insanity. Just regret it. People said, I won't. I don't apologize. I never retract. Why? Why won't people apologize? Why don't people retract? Shame. Because to retract is to say, I did a shameful thing. So they would rather discard a relationship than experience shame, is then say, yes, I had a moment of moral insanity. I wrote vicious, horrible things. I acted like a predator. I repent of it. I regret it. I'd like to erase it. Thank you for your offer to erase it. I would love to do that. I'd love to get back to the beginning. I say, great, we're good. We've all had those moments, and just don't do it again. I've had many, many people, where I've received these predatory communications, either text, email, or actually verbally. I always offer a rewind. All you got to do is take it back, regret it. And somebody say, thank you so much. I had a bad moment. I said, okay, we're all human. And some people say, no, I won't take it back. And I thought to myself, well, there's the shame wound. There's the shame wound. It's too debilitating to say, I had a moment of moral insanity. So again, I want to share this with you because I'm using these stories as a way for me to discuss that one of the most awful experiences of the human condition, which is the experience of shame. So he says, and its desire is toward you. So the snake is predatory. Now, just try to imagine, okay, that within you, there is a predator. that wants to come out. Jung would say it's deep in the shadow. The predatory animal is in the shadow, lurking, waiting. It's in its lair. It's in its mirbat, just like the Bible says. It's waiting. And it's waiting for you to get especially angry at somebody. It's waiting for you to feel resentment, shame, and it says, let me handle this. And it comes in, takes over your consciousness, and tries to destroy another person. You stand back aghast. That was in me. The other person came through and say, we're done. I can't stand you for doing that to me. Another person will say, take a rewind, don't do it again. Okay, so now try to imagine there are negative forces in you. The Yetzer Hara, the inner predator is lying in a lair. It desires to take over your consciousness and inflict its damage out into the world. And that's the human condition. So again, that's why I say this is philosophic anthropology. We are all, as it were, Cain. So the divine, now here's my understanding of the author. The author has done a setup here. We all stand for Cain, which says, I did my best. I'm trying to be a good boy. I'm trying to be a good girl. And you insulted me and you shamed me. And I would never recommend doing this to a child, but in this archetypal text, the divine says, I did it on purpose. I did it on purpose. I want you to feel the teshukah, the desire of the sinning animal in the lair that wants to take over you and destroy the world. I want you to know who this is, because that's going to be key to your working out your humanity. And it says, but you can rule over it. Okay. So as it were, God, the divine in this narrative induces the human being into this shame-induced rage, and then says, but you can rule over it. Okay, it says, Elecha teshukato. Again, this is not the sin because that's feminine. So it has to be the robetz, the snake. The snake's teshukah, deep desire, is toward you. Vatatim shol, you can rule over it, which is, I think, the message of any person who's a spiritual counselor or psychologist. People have these awful, awful urges and desires and motivations. And what is our message? It's there. It's real. You can rule over it. You're not destined to destroy yourself or other people. You can rule over it. You need the will and the skill. You can imagine yourself not letting the predator take over. Yes, that's called the vision. Now the will and the skill, which have, probably 70% of my teaching is about the will and the skill to deal with the negative aspects of the unconscious ego self, ego states, subpersonalities, and people who engage in this work and can regulate their ego states and subpersonalities, they live better. Everybody around them feels better. So like you might say, my professional life is very much dedicated to exactly that. Atatim sholo, you can rule over this, but you need the will and the skill. Get to work. All right, now what happens? Vayomer Cain el Hevel Achiv. Okay, now Cain says to his brother, this is a mysterious, because what happens next is not what he said. Okay, now, either I'm saying something preposterous next, which is very likely, okay? Or this is one of the most sophisticated examples of writing. Okay? So there's a story going, and the story is, while they were out in the field, Cain rises up against Hevel and kills him. So Cain is quoting from the story, because it says, and Cain said, but it doesn't say what he said. All we have is what happens. So Cain comes to brother and says, let me read to you what's going to happen to us right now. Can you imagine that happening in the story? Where one character says to another, I'm going to read to you a little bit about us, because I want you to know what's going to happen. It says, and Cain rose up and killed Hevel. Hevel, did you get that? Because that's what's going to happen next, right? So either we have a terribly incompetent author that said, and Cain said, blank, and then it describes what happens. But I don't think we have a terribly incompetent author. We might have a super sophisticated author that shocks the reader and says, the character in the story is reading from the story to the other character in the story. I went, wow, either this is preposterous, I'm a really poor reader of the Bible, or this is the most sophisticated writing I've ever seen. This is my favorite writing, where suddenly Kundera does this, where he like breaks the fourth wall, speaks to the reader and says, well, what's going to happen next. So now let me take you back to the story and watch it happen. So Kundera does this. One reason I like Kundera's writing is he breaks time, space, the art of the novel, and just does his own crazy stuff. If you haven't read Milan Kundera, The Unbearable Lightness of Being, or The Book of Laughter and Forgetting, go read it. You're gonna really, really be touched by it and impressed, and you will laugh and maybe not forget. So he reads that to him, and Hevel goes, "Oh crap, really? That's what's going to happen next?" Yep, that's what's going to happen next. All right, so it happens. Vayomer Adonai Elkaim, right? Where's Hevel? And he wants to say, you don't know, you did this. Now, this is like God in the Garden of Eden say, "Where's Adam and Eve? Did you eat from the tree?" I think the divine set them up and knew very well what had happened. Well, here we have the divine again, in my mind, these completely insincere rhetorical questions. Where's Hevel? Where the divine set this whole thing up. And basically he put into Cain this devastating experience of shame. You can do one of two things: you can control it or go kill your brother. And Cain says, I'll go through door B. So he says, where is Vayomer Adonai El Cain, Hevel Achicha? Where's your brother? Vayomer lo yadati. I don't know. Now, the word yada, of course, is from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and now we know good and evil. See what happened here? Yada is from Eitz Da'at Tova Ra. Here the divine says, Cain, Tov Vara, good and evil, or Tov Vera, right, good, Mira, good, evil, which is basically you have a choice. You have yada, you have knowledge, yesh tov v'yesh ra. You can rule over it. So he says, lo yadati, I don't know where he is, or I've chosen not to know the choice. Lo yadati. I insist, again, I don't know quite how to express it. This is still new to me. Lo yadati. I'm not going to do the good. I've decided not to. Lo yadati. I'm not going to take the offer of good and evil. I'm just going to do one of them. He says, Lo yadati. I mean, it's a clear reference to the tree of Da'at. I just haven't fully plumbed out what exactly it means. He said, Lo yadati. And then he says, this is great. He responds to the divine with his own insincere why question. He says, oh, you want to do this rhetoric of asking why questions? I'll ask you a why question. Hashomer achi anochi? Am I my brother's keeper? All right. And I thought to myself, wow, you paid back the rhetorical questioner with your own insincere rhetoric. Am I my brother's keeper? That's actually part of the human condition. We are supposed to be our brother's keepers. So we're supposed to protect each other. And Cain says, oh, you want to play this insincere rhetorical question game? Let me do it to you too, since you taught it so well. You provocateur, divine you. And Vayomer says, Me'asita, what did you do? I think knowing fully well what he did. Kol deme achicha tzoakim elai. The blood of your brother is shouting out to me, min ha'adama, from the adama. Wow, the adama, the earth. He's an ish adama. He's a man of the earth. His father is Adam, the earth man. The earth, you might say, is the purview of Cain. And so what has happened? He kills his brother, and the blood seeps into the earth, which is, you might say, the domain of Cain. So the domain of Cain is now permeated with the blood of his brother. It's an incredibly powerful, disturbing literary thing. And I think this is where the talent of the author really, really begins to soar into the horrid depths of the human condition. You, Ish Adama, the man of the earth, your brother's blood has sunk into the earth and is crying out to me. Now, what does blood cry out? The blood cries out for revenge. That's what we expect to happen next. He says, and verse 11, Va'ata, and now, as a consequence, Arur ata min ha'adama, you are cursed from the ground. So Cain's entire identity, which was an ish adama, a man of the ground, he brought his gift to God from the fruit pri ha'adama. He says, you are now cursed from the ground. Your entire identity is destroyed. You are no longer an Ish Adamah. You no longer inherit your father's Adam, the earth man, the identity of working the earth. You are robbed from everything you know because of what you have done. Now, again, I think this goes into the human condition. Many of us have experienced these things where we have a certain view of how our life ought to go. Not all of us, some of us, a considerable number of some of us, where something happens. Sometimes you say, well, yes, my fault, I did it, but I didn't expect this to happen. Or sometimes you didn't do anything, just the randomness of the human condition. And as it were, the life you thought you would lead, you are cursed from it. No more. You will not till the soil anymore. I don't know what you're going to do, but you're not going to do that. So when you have the sense of my life has been taken from me, this is Cain here. Now, what God says, because you did something, but I know many people whose the future life that they deserved was taken from them, not because they did anything. It's just that that life, as it were, they became accursed from that life they were supposed to live. So I think this is, again, a deep reflection on the tragic nature of the human condition. So he says, you are cursed. Arur atamin adama asher patzta et pia, that opened its mouth to take the blood of your brother. So the blood is seeping down. The earth opens its mouth and as it were, sucks the blood of Cain deep into the earth. Now with the connection of dam, blood, and adama is played here. It says, the earth opened its mouth, lakachet et deme achicha, adama, earth, dam, blood, miadecha, ki ta'avod et adama, when you try to work the land, lo tosef et kocha, it will not bring forth its power. Now, see the word tosef, it will not additionally bring its power. That was Cain. Remember, it says, but tosef laledet, and she additionally added. The word lahosif is added here. Because you killed your brother who was the tosefet, the add-on, the earth will no longer add on to its fruit for you. It's a wonderful, wonderful plan where it takes us right back to the identity of Hevel, which is the add-on, which is the additional to the essence. And it says, Na v'na, you will be a wonder and a vagrant upon the earth, right? So this is the curse of Cain. Na v'nad, a vagrant, a wanderer on the earth. I think this goes into that sense that of being the ger anochi ba'aretz. This is in Psalm 119. I won't go there today. I'm already going over time. But that sense is, I'm a stranger in a strange land. This is Moses. Ger anochi be'eretz nochria. I'm a stranger in a strange land. If you're here, you've experienced it. It's probably our common denominator. If everybody comes to our gatherings, you've had the experiences. I'm a stranger in a strange land. I don't understand this. I don't know why I'm here. Maybe I'll study some poetry. Maybe I'll read the Bible. But I want to get over this estrangement. So we are all nav, strangers. Ger anochi be'eretz nochria. I'll bring the citation next time. I believe it's in Psalm. I think Moses said, if I'm not mistaken, and Psalm 119. I'll look up next time. But just imagine that. Ger anochi be'eretz nochria. I'm a stranger in a strange land. Robert Heinlein fans, okay, now you know where that came from. Is it the Allman Brothers, Stranger in a Strange Land? That's where it came from. Ger anochi be'eretz nochria. That is the human condition right here. You're going to be a nav and nad. Your life is not going to sustain you, and you're going to be a wonder and a vagrant in an earth that's become strange to you. Vayomer Cain el Adonai, Gadol avoni min so. This sin is greater. My avon is more than sin. It's like a deep transgression. It is more bearable min so, from bearing. Going back to what God said, im hetiv set. If you do well, set, you'll bear it. And you say, I actually can't bear it. This is more than I can bear. This is more than I can bear. How many of you have felt that? I cannot bear this sense of being a stranger in a strange land. You've banished me from the Adamah, like his parents banished from Edom. Now, Cain is banished from the Adamah itself. Everywhere he goes, he's banished. He walks on the earth. He's banished from the earth. I'll hide from you the rest of my life. Now try to imagine this. You know, you will never be home on the planet. God is after you, and he says, I'm gonna hide. Well, where are you gonna hide? The land hates you, God hates you, and you feel, what can I do? Like I'm gonna hide. Like, my parents hid in the Garden of Eden. We're gonna say, yeah, where are you gonna hide? Where are you gonna hide? So he says, um, uh, uh, um, Mi panecha esater, I'm going to hide from you. Vaiti navanad ba'aretz, and I'm going to be a vagrant wonder in the land. The kol motzi yargeni, and everybody who sees was going to kill me. They're all going to know what I did. Now, the, the poor reader of the Bible says, where do these other people come from? And I say, it's not what the story is about. Okay, so there is a Adam and Eve we don't know about. There's lots of people. Why would you infect the story with such a question of a person who can't read the text? Okay, there were other people. I really got to go into that. Everybody's going to kill me. I I can't work the land. I'm a stranger on the land. You're after me. Everybody finds is going to kill me. You can't get into the more um, uh, pitiful condition of the human being. This reminds me of the guy who wrote Alice's Restaurant, who Alice just died. So I was thinking about him. What was his name again? Somebody remind me. I'm just blanking.
Arlo Guthrie.
Arlo Guthrie. So I heard on an Arlo Guthrie album, he has this long kind of riff on the last guy. Anybody remember that? He says there's always somebody poor, and a guy a little bit poor, and a guy doesn't have shoelaces, or the guy doesn't have shoes. He goes and he says, in any discussion, there's a last guy. And I remember as a teenager, there's a last guy. So he's riffing on the last guy. Well, this is Cain. He's the last guy. The earth doesn't like him. God doesn't like him. Everywhere he goes, they're gonna want to kill him. So he's Arlo Guthrie's the last guy. Okay. Um, uh, so I'll have to end here. We're going on so long. I think I'll have to finish up next week. Vayomer lo Adonai lachen. Okay, I'm going to help you out here. And makes it worse. Uh, uh, Kol horeg Cain, anybody who kills Cain for being a murderer, Shivatayim you come. I'm going to give him sevenfold. And we human beings are being, stop the carnage. Stop the carnage. You're going to kill 7 people? Like, just like say, don't kill Cain. You don't have to like visit more death and carnage onto humanity. But that's the sense. You kill him, I'm going to kill 7 of you. I said, God, could you just relax and stop this? He says, Vayasem Adonai lekain ot levilti hakot oto komoto. He gives him the sign of Cain, so that nobody will kill him. Okay, I'll end here with this comment. When we typically think of the sign of Cain, it's the sign that he's a murderer. From the story, everybody knows he's a murderer. There weren't that many people. Okay, it's like the Wild West had like 100 people, and everybody knew who the murderer was. He said, "You can't stay in this town. The earth is not going to respond to you. I don't like you. Nobody likes you." And the guy says, "So what am I going to do?" Everybody knows who he is. So, you know what? I'm going to put a sign on you, right? I don't know, neon sign on his forehead. I don't know, sign on you. Don't kill Cain. And so that's like the first commandment. Don't kill Cain, right? So he walks around with a sign that says, from God, that says, Levilti hakot oto kol motzo. Okay? Anybody who finds Cain, don't kill him. This is so mysterious to me. The more I read it, really, in some ways, the less I understand it. There's something really deep going on here. Just right, you're the last guy. Everybody hates you. You murdered your brother. You're trying to hide from God, which you can. You're a vagrant wonder throughout the land. And wherever you go, they know who you are. And everyone wants to kill you. And God says, okay, I'm going to tell them not to kill you. I don't know what that means. I don't know what it means, but it feels deep. All right, I'm going to end here today. It clearly